before we get into this episode, there's something that might be of interest that I wanted to tell you about. Scene and Herd, who run this podcast, have been asked by Scotland Food and Drink to undertake a strategic review of the Scotland Food and Drink Excellence Awards. Now, these Excellence Awards have been going for almost 20 years and are a huge mainstay of the food and drink sector, but it's time to ensure that they're still relevant. So if you have ever been involved in the Scotland Food and Drink Excellence Awards, or even if you've ever had an opinion about them, we would love for you, please, to complete our survey. So if you go to the On Farm Twitter, which is at @on_farm UK, and click the link in the bio, there will be a tab in there that will take you to the survey, and it should only take you a very short while to complete, but we would be enormously grateful. Hello and welcome to the On Farm podcast. I'm sitting here today in my little studio and I actually can't believe what I'm about to say. You are currently, as I speak, listening to the UK's third most listened to food podcast. So this week, according to the official Apple chart ratings, we are third most listened to. So we're ahead of Heston Blumenthal, Nigella, Jamie Oliver, BBC 4's food programme. It's amazing. They're all below us in the charts. We are so chuffed. So guys, Heston, Nigella, Jamie, if you're listening, catch us if you can. Okay, onwards. I'll try and calm myself down. Last week's episode, an interview with Wigtonshire dairy farmer Rory Christie, obviously struck a nerve with lots of people out there. Rory shared some hard truths on supply chains, Brexit, climate change and much more besides. Do go back and have a listen if you haven't heard it already, and again, we really appreciate all your shares and all your support. Thank you. We decided not that long ago to make a point of name checking and thanking people and businesses who we see sharing posts on social media that include our handle, which is at @on_farm UK, and we have a long list of people to thank this time. We're so grateful. So here we go. This is just some of the names. We'll try and get through others in future. But here we go. Thank you to Jock Gibson, Chris Helson, Amanda Brown, Lunan Bay Farm, Robert Ramsey from Soil Essentials, Rora Dairy, the handle Just a Farmer, Alison Milne, Gordon Caldwell, Stuart McWhirter, Greenburn HR and many others. So thank you all so much. But on now with today's episode. This is the first of a number of podcasts we'll be doing in coming months in partnership with the umbrella organisation for Scottish Farm and Food Industry Co-ops, that is SAOS, which stands for the Scottish Agricultural Organisation Society. Among many other things, SAOS do all that they can to help Scottish agriculture meet farming's enormous challenge of responding to climate change. In future episodes, we'll be focusing on a variety of different aspects of the ways in which co-ops are tackling climate change. But today is an overview. We're introducing the themes, talking about various challenges faced, and looking at the progress that's already been made, effectively setting the scene for what SAOS has got planned for these future episodes. Climate change is such a big challenge that there's no way we could cover it in one episode. So a bit later on, we'll bring in Angela Porchez of the Fruit Growers Co-op Angus Growers and Jonny Williams from Farmstock, a red meat marketing cooperative. But for the first half of today's chat, we've got Emma Patterson Taylor, an SAOS policy manager focused on climate change. And the next voice you'll hear is the organisation's chief executive, Tim Bailey.
The key part of my role at the moment, I suppose, two key roles. One is around raising the profile of what our co-op members who own SAOS, what they are undertaking, what they're achieving. And secondly, in terms of reviewing how our, I suppose, organisational strategy is going to be playing out in the coming 5 years. And climate change is possibly about the biggest challenge, but also opportunity that is facing agriculture over the coming number of years.
So Emma, that must make you quite a busy lady. Could you tell us a bit more about your role and what that involves within SAOS?
I suppose my role really, particularly for the last 5 years, has been trying to help the farming industry get to grips with the gnarly issue that is climate change. It was always going to be incredibly difficult for farmers to get their heads above the parapet of the daily business that is running their farms, to really work out what to do, never mind to really understand what those issues are. So yes, it keeps us busy, but it's really rewarding, challenging work.
Yes, I imagine it keeps you very busy. But, if you're starting to see a lot more activity within this area, it must, as you say, be really rewarding to see the effort that people are putting in. I read an article that you wrote recently, Emma, and it really got me thinking. And the title of it was, "It's Time to Leave the Ostriches to Their Sand." And that really kind of struck a chord, because I think whilst there is a huge amount of action and activity going on within this area, there are probably still quite a few people who are in denial, passing the blame, thinking that they're doing enough when actually they're not. So is this an issue that we have to overcome before we can actually make progress?
Yeah. In fairness to our sector, I don't think it's been easy to understand what our role is and how we can tackle that. I think historically there's been this traditional kind of polarised position between the environmental lobby and the farming lobby. I think that just emerged over time. It was kind of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring began the conversation around potential concerns about pesticides, for example, and the impact they were having on the environment. And I think that really supported the growth of the environmental lobby, which was incredibly important and which we've seen today, a rise of Greta Thunberg and all of that movement. But for the farming industry, I think it was quite difficult to really understand what their role was, because it must have really felt like everything they did was being damned. So I suppose there's this key bit we need to do about going, let's be clear about agricultural's role in terms of climate change impacts, but let's also be clear about what we should celebrate and what they do, so that farmers understand that they have a positive role to play. And there's a huge opportunity in there for the farming industry.
Well, yes, and we'll come on to that and discuss all of the various ways in which things that are already being done, and ways in which farmers and the farming sector can mitigate climate change. But again, I suppose another foundation stone that we maybe need to lay right now is in terms of definition and terminology. We've done a couple of episodes in the past about climate change, and we've talked to a number of people, and sometimes it appears to me that not everybody has a full understanding of what it is. Can you help them in that regard before we bring everybody in to make their contribution?
Yeah, I suppose if we're talking about climate change, we're really talking about the kind of global warming impact of climate change, greenhouse gases. If you picture the Earth as a circle and you picture a bubble around that, greenhouse gases are causing a warming impact. So they're creating that additional bubble layer, which essentially means that radiation from the sun comes through that bubble, hits the Earth, bounces back and gets stuck within that bubble, and then bounces back into the Earth, and so on and so forth. So it's just that heating effect. And essentially the IPCC, so the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, defines these greenhouse gases as having this potential global warming impact. That's what we're talking about when we talk about climate change. So we're talking about the Earth heating up and all of the consequences that can have for our livelihoods, really, in our future.
It's a bit like we've covered a couple of episodes recently on organic farming, and I think if you stop 10 people in the street and ask them for a definition of what organic farming was, you'd get 10 different answers. And I think it's similar here. I think many people within the sector will find that really helpful. So thank you. So Tim, we know what the problem is, and we know that farmers to a degree are in some quarters seen as the villains of this. But we know that the farming sector can actually be the hero in this situation. So what is it that SAOS can do on its own, but also crucially by working with others, because you are the organisation of collaboration, to demonstrate what's being done and encourage more to be done?
There's absolutely a challenge there. There's a problem on one hand, but actually it is very much an opportunity as well. And unlike the oil and gas industry, for example, unlike some of the challenge you might have with some heavy industrial sectors, unlike you might find with some of aviation, they're net emitters. There's not an ability to mitigate that and even potentially overcome that through sequestration like agriculture can. So, agriculture is in a very strong place, and, and agriculture in Scotland in particular is in a very strong place to be able to turn this around and turn it from a problem into an opportunity. So in terms of SAOS, then I think just as mitigating climate change can't be sorted by one farm or even a handful of farms or even a group of farms, it can only be led at a sector level, then very much the same applies organisationally. That can't be achieved in a fragmented way. That can only be achieved by organisations working together. And I think from SAOS's perspective is that, as I said at the beginning, we estimate probably about a third to 40% of the agricultural output in Scotland is delivered through our co-ops. So I think on one hand, we've kind of got that legitimacy to lead because of the footprint and the extent of our membership. But at the same time, on the flip side of it, we've got that accountability, that responsibility to do so as well. So it's about galvanising our membership, but our membership working with other memberships and other organisations to make this a success.
Do you think there is enough joined up thinking and collaboration going on within the industry? We spoke to Martin Kennedy, Vice President of NFU Scotland, about his efforts to get the general public to understand the positive impact that farming makes. We've done an episode with Nigel Miller and Mike Robinson from Farming for 1.5 Degrees. Do you think at the moment there is enough of this collaboration within the various organisations who've all got the ability to pull together, or is that something else that is continually improving and developing?
There's definitely more to be done, but we're only at the start of the journey in general. I think the key bit is there's a willingness. There's a willingness to act. There's a willingness to sort of collaborate and cooperate on this crucial topic. So that's going to affects us all. In many ways, it's if you've got the willingness, then that's the first battle won. So now it's really just a case of joining up the dots, aligning people. And I think, the common thing that binds us is, whether you're National Farmers Union of Scotland, whether you're SAOS, whether you're the Rural College, whether you're AHDB, whether you're any other organisation, we're passionate about the future of our industry and we want to preserve it and build on it and make sure it's there for 100 years' time. Absolutely.
And as you've said, farming is in a strong position. Yes, it might be part of the problem in terms of its emissions, but it's also the primary tool to help absorb carbon sequestration, but also to help produce renewable energy. So I think it's probably quite timely now for me to introduce our other two guests today, because they are both representing the sector. We are also joined by Jonny Williams from Farmstock Scotland and Angela Porchez. Angela, is that the correct pronunciation of your surname?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yes, oh good, from Angus Growers. So I wonder if you could each, perhaps Jonny first, if you don't mind, just tell us a bit more about who you are and what you do and what Farmstock Scotland does.
Thanks, Anna. Farmstock Scotland is a marketing cooperative based in the south of Scotland. We represent about 400 predominantly beef and sheep farmers, and we market their lambs on their behalf to their best advantage, dealing with supermarkets and processors throughout Scotland and indeed throughout the whole of the UK.
Thank you very much, Jonny. And Angela, can you tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm the General Manager for Angus Growers. We are a marketing cooperative, currently have 19 members, primarily based within Angus, Perthshire and Fife. Collectively, we currently farm about 600 hectares of soft fruit, and that's a combination of strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, blackberries and some cherries as well. We work very closely as a cooperative and also as a producer organisation.
Angela, it sounds like maybe your next door neighbours are doing a bit of DIY or something at the moment, are they?
Do you know what that'll be? That'll be the neighbours. That'll be the neighbours redoing their patio across the way.
Don't worry. We've had worse. I tell you, we've had much worse on this podcast,
okay,
so don't worry at all.
Sorry.
So, perhaps a surprising question, Jonny, but you're involved in the livestock sector, Angela involved in soft fruits. Why do you think Tim and Emma have invited you onto this podcast today?
Well, I'm guessing potentially, the red meat industry has had a real kicking historically for being one of the main culprits in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. I guess as a co-op, maybe potentially by accident initially, we, over the last 5 years, we've really tried to encourage our producers to become more efficient through benchmarking and monitoring of outputs and inefficiencies. In doing so, they have probably drastically reduced their carbon footprint, which is a really good news story for the whole red meat industry. And in the last couple of years, we've also started monitoring aspects of the supply chain like haulage and road miles. I think in the last year we saw a reduction of approximately a million transport miles, which is a really great soundbite.
It certainly is, yeah, absolutely. And can you tell me a little bit more, though, also about the feed and breeding side of things? Because I remember when we recorded with Nigel Miller, who is a vet by trade and former president of NFU Scotland, and he was saying these are really two really critical areas within livestock production where farmers can make a really, really positive impact.
Yeah, and it's in terms of, we've been doing various projects and we've been looking at days to slaughter and how producers can significantly reduce the time which animals are on farm, and that's through better management of grazing, through better management of feeding and such like that. And we've been publicising the good practices which our best producers are using and trying to encourage our other producers to adopt those practices, and so, you know, the whole supply chain, the whole co-op can benefit. And
going back to the analogy that I spoke with Emma about earlier, about ostriches and burying their head in the sand, how have you found within your members the attitude, I suppose, and the belief that they are part of the solution, or has there been any kind of element of denial there? Most producers I speak to, I think, are, you know, they view themselves as custodians of their farms and of their landscape, and they're very proud of that, and they would hate to think that they were in some way damaging their natural resource. So, I mean, you're always going to get a few people who aren't going to come on board, and I agree with Emma's analogy about, you know, just it's time to forget about those. You're not going to change these people's minds, and just let them do their thing, you know. Angela, can you tell us a bit about the soft fruit sector and the work that's being done both within your co-op but also perhaps slightly more broadly in terms of looking for solutions?
Yeah, again, you know, the same as Jonny's mentioned, our producers are very proud of what they're producing, and they definitely want to be part of the solution. They don't want to be part of a problem. So they're very keen, and they're very forward thinking. I think as an industry, we're particularly good at not blowing our trumpets too loudly. Oftentimes we forget to let people know what we do and what we have done. Consistently over the past decade, we have actually been introducing a number of environmental measures which do make a big impact, but we're just quietly do that in the background. We're not very good at letting people know what it is we're doing. You know, when I think about over the past 10 years, we've pretty much discontinued the use of peat as a growing system. We primarily use coir, which, as you know, is a waste product from the coconut. We use coir probably in about 80% of our crops, and this alone, obviously, just the reduction of peat will inevitably lead to the reduction of the mining of peat, and the use of peat reduces the emissions of greenhouse gases. In addition, we also use biological controls, which I think is something that people don't really know about. You know, the average person out there doesn't know that we use these predatory insects as a way of controlling pests rather than using chemical alternatives. So, over the years, we have been slowly introducing measures that do make farming and particularly soft fruit farming more sustainable and environmentally friendly. Other than that, you know, we're always looking at ways of mitigating our impact, and at the moment we're looking quite seriously at the plastic use in our punnets and lids, because that's obviously the one thing that the consumer will probably see. And as well, you know, the whole process, the whole supply chain from start to finish, again, paying attention to our fuel consumption, paying attention to the miles that our fruit travels. And yeah, very much trying to raise awareness to the public as to where your food comes from. Encourage them to eat more British fruit and veg.
And I think that, again, it's all too easy if you're a consumer to start laying the blame. It's all too easy if you're anybody, to be fair, to start laying the blame elsewhere. But I think it's about looking at all parts of the jigsaw and putting it all together. And I think that's a key one, actually, is we need to look at our own consumption habits and where we buy from. And by supporting, for example, you know, the very best, and I should add, the most tasty Scottish strawberries, or buying, you know, grass-fed beef, for example, that's come from Scotland instead of the other side of the world. That's actually helping too. It's not just about trying to blame those who are causing the emissions, but actually to all of us, I think, doing our bit. Tim and Emma, Angela kind of touched on it there, but I think what's also interesting is that part of the solution is willingness, working together and collaboration. But technology can also provide part of the solution as well.
Yeah, at the end of the day, technology provides lots of options around how we tackle climate change. But technology, being technology, can often be quite expensive. But what we see as an advantage of through a co-op is that where you've got a number of owners, farmer owners of that business, user owners, as it were, whether it's 20 or 2,000, at the end of the day, you can all chip in. You can all chip in to invest in that technology, which then everyone can benefit from. We probably ought to be looking a little bit more smartly around businesses working together, accessing R&D tax credits, for example. So I think there's various avenues out there, and it's just about picking the right funding pot for the right measure.
And I think a key word that you've just uttered there, Tim, is measure. How can farming demonstrate its success story if there's no before and after, as it were, and no data to support that?
Yeah, I mean, I think more generally, it's a case of bringing data to life for growers, for farmers. It's a very dry word, isn't it? But it's actually about making it relevant. Like anything in life, if you can make something relevant. We're involved with doing some pilot work, looking at data that is held by the SkyeEID business that manages the livestock and movement traceability data for all of Scotland's pigs, sheep and soon to be cattle. There's loads of data there already. And so we're actually mining that now with a view of actually then, I suppose, enabling us to be able to present that data back to farmers to actually see how their relative performance is relative to their peers, and also, I suppose, relative to what best practice looks like. So, that doesn't involve any extra data, I gather. That's data we already have to help people make decisions.
Farmers, as we've said, are part of the solution, but they also need to be armed with information. And I found in all the conversations I've had since we started this podcast, in particular when it comes to climate change, farmers are quite rightly, I think, feeling a bit defensive because there has been a bit of an attack on them. That's why we started this podcast, because we wanted to try and redress the balance and put some positivity in there. But perhaps part of that defensiveness is actually to do with the fact that they're not necessarily armed with the information to be able to defend themselves and justify what they do. So it strikes me that actually, yes, whilst we've joked that data is a boring word, actually it's crucial to this, because not only does it demonstrate how farming is a solution, it also enables and empowers farmers to be able to explain what they're doing and gives them extra confidence. Angela, would you say that's true to a degree?
I think, again, Jonny actually mentioned, we have very similar situation. We have a lot of data. I think that one of the areas that we've identified now is, when it comes to data capturing, we're getting better at it. We understand the data as it comes in. But for us, the big step forward is now going to be, I guess, what they call storytelling data. Taking that data and making it useful, delivering it in bite-sized messages to our members that they can very quickly pick up and understand. They have jobs to do. They don't have time to sit and stare at spreadsheets and numbers for hours on end. So yeah, it's very much about interpreting the data and pulling out the key useful bits that are going to help them make essential business decisions moving forward.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to add was we've started doing a competition on a monthly basis rewarding our producers which are the most efficient. And it's been really successful, and people become quite competitive about it all. I think it's a great lesson to. It's been a great experience, and that farmers do want to get better and do want to become more efficient, and you just need to instill a bit of competitive spirit, and they all want to be the best.
Oh, they do. Yeah, they all loved it. Well, my husband's an arable farmer, so less relevant to you. But, livestock farms are, I'm sure, the same. You can't drive anywhere without peering over the hedges and the fences to see who's doing what. So instilling a bit of competitiveness sounds like an incredibly good strategy, if you ask me, Jonny.
But it's positive. It's positive competitiveness. It's not the stick beating them. It's a bit of carrot, and I think that's what we need.
Yes, absolutely.
I must admit, we do something very similar. We have forecasting competition, because obviously forecasting is key to both the marketing side and because it helps minimize waste. So yeah, I think our growers take great pride in the annual forecasting awards that we have. And again, it is just recognizing people who have done a really good job at, crop predictions and forecasting. So yeah, I think, as you said, a little bit of healthy competition is a good thing.
Can I jump in there too, Anna?
Go for it.
Yeah, no, just going to add to Jonny's point. I think it's right. There's a brilliant opportunity, and lots of our members are doing work with data that they hold, of their members, and using that to reflect back. People have done varying things, but almost a scorecard type approach. So they'll have some kind of league table that they'll reflect back to their membership in order to give a greater understanding to their individual members of how they're performing. And typically performance will come down to, a financial bottom line, but also an environmentally efficient one, which is a fantastic way of, I guess, increasing awareness as much as anything else, as well as improving the competitiveness of the co-op. And I just wanted to add as well, just the point Tim was making about, technology, and you were asking about data. We're doing a number of sort of interviews and surveys with our whole membership, everyone who's happy to be involved. And they've been really interesting conversations that we've had around trying to say to our member co-ops, what would you like to be doing that you're not able to do? And typically, I think they can often be big investor projects that, a business would love to take on, but the barrier is financial. And I think there's something that we could do in there around advocating on behalf of our membership to say, look, these are big infrastructure projects which need some kind of funding, which the membership will also support in order to get them off the ground. And there's something about making sure that government and other funding partners understand investment is going to be needed to help the farming industry take advantage of those opportunities.
And going back, I suppose, that takes me back to the word recognition, really. I think the farmers need and deserve and want that recognition. And I don't think it's selfish of them to expect that. But Tim, you'll be perhaps not meeting them face to face at the moment because of restrictions, but you'll be talking to farmers and co-op members day in, day out. How important do you think it is across the industry that they are given the recognition for the positives as well as being beaten over the head, as they're more used to, for the emissions? Well,
I think it just fulfills a basic need of human nature, isn't it? I mean, farmers are no different to my job, your job, anyone else's, really. You could have reason to get out of bed in the morning. And if you're getting out of bed in the morning and all you're feeling is like you're getting beaten up every time you switch on the news, or you stick on the radio, or you look at the internet, particularly when, nothing could be further from the truth. There's balance in everything in life. There's stuff to do better, but there's good stuff already. And all farmers want is a recognition of stuff that's going well, of the positive contributions, and then that in itself becomes an incentive to then focus on improving even further. That's coming back to Jonny's example about incentivizing. It's about finding the sweet spot that incentivizes people.
Yes, and I guess so in that sense, it's not rocket science, is it? It's about appealing to human nature, as you said, Tim, and ensuring that there's a reality check. There has to be a reality check about the emissions, but also another reality check giving farmers the recognition that they deserve and the incentive to keep doing it for the rest of their generation and the next and the next. And no matter how much grief farming gets, I will always argue back to whoever it is that's giving the grief that the most uttered sentence I've ever heard from individual farmers is that they are ultimately just custodians of the land and they are taking care of it for the next generation. And I think that's the mindset of the majority, absolutely the majority. But looking ahead to future generations, Tim, do we have another challenge on our hands when it comes to targets and clarity of targets and what we're actually aiming for?
I think there's clarity in terms of the top line targets that are enshrined in law. The next stage is actually coming back to having an aligned agreement on how we're going to get to those, how we're going to fulfill those targets, how we phase them, what measures can be put in place to do that. So the targets are reality. They're enshrined in law, but it's actually about the tactical implementation of measures to do that. And that will very much depend on sector, even geography to some degree. We're now starting to see we move into that phase, I guess, really. I mean, last week with the publication of the Farming for 1.5 Degrees report that came out, that was very much talking around 5 stages. So it's about putting the proverbial flesh on the bones now. Just
to add that, I mean, I think, Tim's absolutely right. You know, those targets are set in stone, and that's the direction of travel, and we all know that, which is, useful for that clarity. There is also an understanding at government level about the challenges in farming, the inherent emissions that are the nature of food production. So that is something that we do know is an issue that we're going to contend with. What I think will become really critical for us is demonstrating that we are making progress. So it may well be that we can negotiate the ways in which we demonstrate that, but it will be non-negotiable that we demonstrate that we are moving somewhere. And that, I think, brings us right back to data. It might well be that we need to find intelligent ways ourselves to set standards and to set measures that go, look, we can show you we have moved from A to B to D and so on, so that the direction of travel is really clear. I think that's important.
Yeah, so it comes down then, if my interpretation is correct, to these two things. Data will be critical to demonstrate progress, and collaboration will be critical to make that progress. So those, for me, seem to be the two fundamentals. Do you think that's true, Emma?
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, no, I think that's true. That's very on brand and on message for SAOS. But no, I think it's innately what we do, and I think it's what the whole industry needs to do to make our way towards net zero.
And at the risk of sounding on brand again, SAOS is the organisation to provide that leadership and to, for want of a better phrase, rally the troops and take that forward collectively.
Okay, well, I'm going to do a shameless plug here, if you'll forgive me for that.
Right.
Given the last 5 years of my working life have been dominated by that exact question and that challenge, we've been working to develop a project called Carbon Positive, which is all about exactly what you've just referred to, telling that positive story about what farmers are doing. So we're launching in spring 21, and essentially what the platform will do is it will provide a profile for every single farm in Scotland, so it can tell a story at farm level, but also at, Scotland, the farm level, so a national level as well, so that we can help get farmers to really understand the positive role that they play, to celebrate the positive contribution they make, to use that to drive change on farm, and to provide education for the farming industry, but also the public around what farming's contribution really is in relation to climate change. So yes, shameless plug over, but we need to have some collaborative efforts in that space to tell our story better than we have.
Absolutely. I think this has been fascinating, and it's got me quite excited for the forthcoming episodes, because as I touched on, this is episode 1, setting the scene, and then we'll really get the nitty-gritty coming up. I think I'm going to more or less wrap it up here, but I would like to come to everybody. I would love to hear from each of you individually, as concisely as you can in a sentence. What's next? Where are we going? The fairest way to do it is probably alphabetical order, isn't it?
Well, as long as you go with first names.
I was actually going to, because I'm used to being picked on when that happens myself. So, Angela, I'm going to pick on you purely because of alphabetical order, if you don't mind.
Right. Well, I think definitely technology. I think technology and AI is what's definitely ahead of us. Better data monitoring, data capturing systems, and just continuing to drive home the messages to both the supermarkets and the customers who buy from us, and extending messages onto the consumers themselves as well, to just really drive home the point about what it is we are doing within our sector, and to encourage people to eat as many British fruit and veg as they possibly can. So.
Thumbs up to that. And Emma, if you don't mind going next.
Yeah, no problem at all. So one sentence, I think I would go for more working together. More working together right across the industry organisations, government, the commercial world. This issue is way too big for anyone to be tackling it alone, and Scotland is way too small to be doing it in a siloed way. So...
Great. And Jonny, you'll be next, I think, in alphabetical order.
And I think it's about communication, and I think we've got a really good story, and I think we just need to find a better way of telling it.
Very concise. I like that. Thank you. And finally, Tim.
I think the key comes down to bringing data, environmental data, business data to life for individual businesses, so that they see it, how it's relevant to them, how it's relevant to benefit them, their business, and then doing that by working together will achieve the collective progress we all need.
Many thanks to Tim Bailey and Emma Patterson Taylor of SAOS, and to Jonny Williams of Farmstock and Angela Porchez of Angus Growers. There's plenty more to come on climate change and lots more from SAOS in forthcoming episodes. If you can't wait though, go back through the On-Farm archive and look for our chat with the leads at Farming for 1.5 Degrees and for our visit last winter to the farm of NFU Scotland Vice President Martin Kennedy. And there's plenty more besides. It's clear, thankfully, that climate change is something that more and more of us are waking up to. Thank you again for listening. These figures and these statistics and this chart would not have happened without you. And we'll see you next time when we'll be helping the Morden Animal Health Research Institute celebrate a very special birthday.